Chapter 7. Baby Designer, New York, 2037. Adam Goldberg, 7 years old, sat quietly in the plush waiting room of the clinic beside his parents, Rachel and Stan Goldberg. The space was a gleaming display of high-tech luxury, clearly tailored for affluent clients seeking to design their ideal children. In the corner, a plasma screen looped an advertisement featuring a young doctor who was a perfect physical specimen of a human being, and beside him, a female doctor equally perfect in appearance.
Make your child the best version of you. Eliminate inherited diseases, cognitive impairments, and excess weight. Customize your child to be intelligent, attractive, athletic, and more. Whatever traits you desire, we likely have a gene for it. And don't worry, we'll keep the best of your traits too.
Rachel and Stan, both in their 40s and slightly overweight, were highly intelligent. They also knew their family histories carried physical and mental health issues, common enough, but burdensome. They adored Adam but regretted the genetic risks they had passed on. To them, this technology felt like a gift, a way to give their next child every possible advantage. They were wealthy and saw it as a logical, even moral, investment in their family's future. Adam, however, felt a growing unease. He understood that any sibling created here would likely outshine him taller, more attractive, more athletic, and certainly more outgoing. The idea of competing with a designer sibling was overwhelming. Being a gifted child, Adam's confidence rested solely in his intelligence. His parents offered one concession: he could choose any pet he wanted if he agreed to having a sibling. Adam loved animals. They were loyal, predictable, and easier to understand than people. The promise of a pet offered him a small comfort in the face of looming change. When the doctor finally entered, he looked nothing like the polished figure in the advertisement. He appeared to be about the same age as Adam's parents, clearly from a time before genetic design had become common. Still, his teeth were as perfect as promised, a result of cosmetic work that helped him maintain a youthful facade. Adam looked at him with quiet disdain. In his mind, anyone who created genetically engineered babies but wasn't one themselves was a traitor, especially to the so-called Darwin children, those born naturally, without lab selection or designer genes. The doctor smiled warmly at Adam and his parents, a genuine smile, though clearly fueled by the hefty fee he was about to earn. "Please, follow me," he said, motioning toward the consultation room. Adam sighed deeply, a final gesture of protest. He sensed that his relatively carefree childhood was coming to an end. Chapter 8. Land of Make-Believe. Space, 2060, Adam 30 years old. Jenny stood by, watching as Adam entered their children's bedroom, opened a book, and began reading to them half-heartedly. His voice was monotone, stripped of its usual enthusiasm. They had 2 children. Nays, a 9-year-old of mixed race, was their adopted daughter, the younger sister of Adam's late ex-business partner and co-inventor, Sophia. Adam didn't speak much about Sophia, but Jenny could sense the weight of their connection in the silences he left behind. She had met Sophia a few times over the years and found her likable, kind, yet a lingering jealousy remained for Jenny. Because Sophia had once been Adam's girlfriend, not just a business partner, it had kept Jenny and Sophia from ever becoming close. Their second child was Zach, a 7-year-old boy who bore a striking resemblance to Jenny with his blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and fair skin. Both children were adorable, clever, athletic, good-natured, and beautiful-looking. They were Darwin children, not genetically designed, but naturally blessed with desirable traits. Zach certainly wasn't engineered, though Jenny couldn't say for sure about Nays. Adam assured her she wasn't, though Nays wasn't Jenny's biological daughter. Still, Jenny loved her fiercely, as though she were her own. Adam told the story, his fingers brushing the familiar grain of its worn spine. He could have chosen the digital version, easily downloaded onto one of his handheld devices, but she knew he preferred the weight of a real book in his hands, the texture of the pages, the quiet satisfaction of turning each leaf. She shared his fondness for the tangible, the irreplaceable charm of printed stories. The book he selected was the best-selling Barry the Bee, The Pollinator, the children's edition, of course. As Jenny watched Adam, she sometimes wondered why she loved him so much. He wasn't particularly good-looking, though he was the best lover she'd ever had. He wasn't cruel to the children, or unkind, but he lacked a certain warmth and often needed prompting to show affection. He sometimes seemed either not to notice or ignore when the children were sad or upset. Jenny attributed this to his autism. He could also be dismissive toward her, making her feel at times like a trophy or a possession meant for his pleasure. Yet he was affectionate too, often cuddling with her, whispering softly in the dim light of the ship. Still, his love for his pet sometimes stung more than she cared to admit. The dog, stored in cryogenic stasis to conserve oxygen, received more visible affection from Adam than the children ever did. Jenny would be lying if she said it didn't anger her, but she kept those feelings to herself. She would never take them out on the animal. She loved animals too. She watched as Adam closed the book. "Let's say a little prayer," he announced, his voice gruff but kind. "Bless this ship, bless this family, and our new life on Mars." "Amen," said Adam. Naze and Zach echoed him in unison, smiling sleepily, happy just to have their father's attention. Adam wasn't particularly religious, but it was something his parents had done with him when he was a child, and he thought it might comfort the children in the vast expanse of space they were traveling across. He kissed their foreheads as they rolled over to sleep. Jenny watched, a lump rising in her throat. Did he truly love them, or had he only done it because she was watching? Chapter 9. Birth Controllers. New York, 2037. Adam, 7 years old. The Goldbergs sat in the opulent consulting room of Dr. Parel. The walls were adorned with fine artwork, no doubt expensive originals. The entire office was wood-paneled, evoking the atmosphere of a Victorian-era Harley Street doctor's office, an odd contrast to the modern, minimalist, high-tech waiting room they had just left behind. Dr. Parel, seated behind an imposing mahogany desk, was casually swiveling in his Chesterfield chair as he reviewed a medical report. The report detailed Rachel's suitability for carrying the child they were about to design. Across from him sat the Goldbergs, with Adam deliberately placed between his parents so he could feel included in the process of designing his sibling. Lowering the report, Dr. Parel looked up and began. "From our initial consultation, you were planning for 2 designer children, a boy first, then a girl 2 years later, correct?" Rachel and Stan exchanged a quick smile, then nodded toward the doctor. "Well?" Dr. Parel hesitated, his tone turning somber. Rachel and Stan instantly sensed the shift. "Looking at your medical report, Rachel, I believe your womb will only be able to sustain 1 more pregnancy." The couple froze. Stan frowned as Rachel let out a frustrated sigh. "Okay, then we'll just have a girl," she said, knowing full well it would provoke Stan. "Like hell we will," Stan retorted. "I'm paying for this." "And it's my womb," Rachel shot back, her voice rising. The light-hearted atmosphere in the room collapsed, and tension filled the space as the couple began to bicker. Adam, wide-eyed, covered his ears. "Please, please." Dr. Parel interjected, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "There may be a solution that satisfies both of you." The Goldbergs fell silent, anxiously waiting. "Have you considered twins? Not identical, but a boy and a girl, both sharing the same womb. It will require more work during and after the pregnancy, but it's entirely possible." Rachel and Stan exchanged a look, their previous frustration melting away at this unexpected compromise. Smiles crept back onto their faces, and the tension evaporated. Adam, watching quietly, felt a wave of relief as his parents finally stopped fighting. "Yes, I'm fine with that," Stan conceded, his voice lighter now. Rachel beamed. "Me too. Twins." She reached over, squeezing Stan's hand, the excitement clear in her eyes. "Great," Dr. Parel said, his professional tone giving way to enthusiasm. "Now that we've settled that, let's start designing." They began selecting the traits you'd expect any parent to want: high intellect, physical and mental health, resistance to obesity and cancer. "Can they be kind?" asked Rachel quietly. "Caring and compassionate. I want them to be a good brother and sister to Adam." Dr. Parel smiled warmly, but out of the corner of his eye, Adam noticed his father roll his eyes. Still, Stan didn't object. Of course they can. We need more of that in the world, not less, said Dr. Parel with a smile. As they left the room, Adam felt a glow of hope. Perhaps having siblings wouldn't be so bad after all. The following day, the dynamics shifted. Dr. Parel found himself in Stan Goldberg's penthouse office, a vast, luxurious space encased by floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of New York. The room was bathed in natural light, with marble floors that gleamed under the sun, giving the space an air of refined elegance. Subtle hints of ancient Greek and Roman architecture echoed throughout the design, a fitting tribute to the headquarters of Goldberg's towering business empire. The serene atmosphere felt at odds with Goldberg's personality, a man whose success was built on anything but peace. His empire spanned multiple industries, but it was New York real estate that formed the backbone of his wealth and power. Ordinarily, Dr. Parel would have demanded that Goldberg come to him, but Goldberg's robot PA had assured him that this meeting would be well worth his time, financially speaking. And so, here he was, sitting on the 100th floor of a sleek skyscraper, with Central Park stretching out below like a sea of green. "Thanks for coming." "No problem," Dr. Parel replied, settling into the chair. "What can I do for you?" Without answering right away, Stan stood and walked toward the window. He gazed out over Central Park, his broad frame outlined by the shimmering skyline. Dr. Parel watched, but all he could see was the silhouette of Stan's back, his posture unyielding. Stan began to speak, his voice firm and deliberate as he stood, arms folded, unconsciously striking a pose that radiated power. "Wherever you look in this city," he said, his eyes fixed on the view, "you'll see one of my buildings. It took decades to build this empire." He paused, glancing briefly over his shoulder. "It wasn't easy. My family made hard choices, ruthless ones, at times. But we did what we had to do. Nothing was given to us." His voice hardened. "But we're not bad people. I'm not a bad man. My company provided thousands of jobs that enabled people to buy homes and send their kids to college. I do my part for charity. Support the arts." He paused again, as though weighing his following words. "I want my family's legacy to continue. Adam's a good kid, but he doesn't have the edge needed to run a business. He doesn't have the grit for tough decisions." Stan took a deep breath, turning back toward the window. "The boy, the twin, he's the one who will inherit the business. I don't need him to be designed kind or caring. I need him to be like me, a ruthless bastard, ready to make the hard calls when necessary." He strode back to his desk, still speaking with conviction. "You can let Rachel design the girl however she wants, but the boy, he needs to be like me. A soft brother for Adam isn't what matters. What matters is an heir who can keep this empire alive." Dr. Parel and Stan Goldberg haggled over the price, an unspoken agreement threading through every word for the genetic design of Stan's son. The task was monumental but straightforward: shape the boy's personality in the image of his father. On ethical grounds, he should disclose the full extent of the modifications to Mrs. Goldberg. However, the contract the Goldbergs had signed when they first enlisted his services was riddled with enough legal loopholes to shield him from any consequences. Besides, Rachel Goldberg wouldn't sue her husband, not when Stan held the financial reins so tightly. When the final number was reached, Stan smiled, and Parel could almost hear the sound of victory in the air. They toasted with an aged, impossibly rare single malt, Stan's customary ritual for sealing a deal. But this was no ordinary deal. Stan wasn't just securing a transaction, he was buying a genetically designed heir to his empire, a boy who would inherit not just his name, but his very mindset. Dr. Parel couldn't deny the gravity of what they had just set in motion. This child wouldn't just fit into Stan's world, he'd dominate it. As Parel stepped into the sleek, glass elevator, it hummed smoothly, descending past each floor of the cavernous, sparsely populated office building. He imagined what the place had looked like a decade ago, bustling with workers before AI took over. Stan had mentioned hard decisions, and Parel wondered if this was one of them, letting machines replace people. The doors slid open, and Dr. Parel walked across the empty lobby to his Nikola Dragstar electric car. He slid into the passenger seat and activated the autonomous mode with a simple voice command, home. The vehicle responded immediately, slipping into the flow of the city's automated traffic, weaving effortlessly among other driverless cars. As the city blurred past, Dr. Parel leaned back, letting the alcohol warm his blood, his mind wandering. Dr. Parel thought to himself, Rachel would never know, not at first anyway. She'd think the boy had the personality she'd chosen, but after 3 years the truth would begin to emerge. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the boy would start to reflect Stan, his arrogance, his ruthlessness. By then, she would have formed a bond with her child, and if she tolerated those traits in her husband, she could learn to love them in her son. The odds of her raising hell would be slim. Dr. Parel smiled faintly as his eyes grew heavy, the car guiding him home in silence.
Black keys and white lines, tracing out the heavy signs. Neon pulse in the dark, waiting for a lonely spark. Finger.
Chapter 10. Pick and Mix, New York. 3037. Dr. Parel sat in his pristine genetics lab, the rhythmic hum of equipment and the soft blue glow of monitors enveloping him in a cocoon of precision and purpose. On his screen, the genetic profiles of Stan and Rachel Goldberg flickered a puzzle that exhilarated and unsettled him. He leaned closer, scanning the intricate sequences of As, Ts, Cs, and Gs that held the blueprint of human life. The Goldbergs' genetic material was strong in some areas, exceptional even. But perfection? Perfection remained elusive. Stubborn little gaps in the code stood between Stan Goldberg's lofty dream and the reality of creating a son, a flawless heir who would one day rule boardrooms as effortlessly as gods once ruled the skies. With a weary sigh, Dr. Parel leaned back, rubbing his temples, and pinched the bridge of his nose, his thoughts spiraling around two glaring issues. First, neither Stan nor Rachel carried genes that predisposed their child to leanness. Their bodies were genetically inclined to store fat, a trait that had once been a triumph of human evolution, ideal for hunter-gatherers enduring scarcity. But in today's world of hyper-engineered, calorie-laden bliss point foods designed to hijack the palate, those same genes spelled trouble. Obesity hovered in the kid's future like a genetic curse, persistent, ugly, and hard to erase. An evolutionary trump card turned evolutionary trap, Parel thought bitterly. This wasn't just a flaw, it was a liability. He resolved to call Donald, the smooth-talking sales rep from Gene Designs, a biotech firm specializing in custom DNA enhancements. Their catalog had recently added a lean gene cluster, a combination of markers designed to optimize metabolism. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. He glanced back at the screen. Fixing the body was one thing, but the mind? That was another challenge entirely. How do you engineer ambition, resilience, the ruthless edge? Chris, Parel called, breaking the quiet. His assistant, a genetics graduate with a sharp mind and a frayed moral compass, didn't look up immediately. Chris was hunched over his workstation, splicing DNA with the precision of an artist painting a masterpiece. Beneath the lab coat, goggles, and gloves, he looked every bit the model scientist. Few would guess the truth of his life, that his nights were consumed by a drug habit he could barely control, and his days were spent in a desperate bid to keep it funded. "Yeah, boss?" Chris finally turned, brushing a stray strand of long hair out of his face. Parel gestured to the screen. "I'm finalizing the Goldberg's male child's genetic profile. The father wants a business titan. What's your take?" Chris leaned back against his workstation, making sure to tuck his trembling hands behind his back, his expression one of practiced detachment. "You know how it is. There's no gene for business genius. Narcissists and psychopaths, they've got traits that work: confidence, emotional detachment, risk-taking. But amplify those too much, and you don't get a CEO. You get a walking HR nightmare." "True," Parel murmured. He'd seen the studies. Narcissism and psychopathy were correlated with success in high-pressure environments, but the line between visionary and villain was razor-thin. "What about dyslexia? A lot of entrepreneurs have it." Chris shrugged. "Sure, you could tinker with the genome, but that's a gamble. Throw in a dyslexia-linked gene cluster, And maybe you get a kid who's a visionary entrepreneur, sharp instincts, terrible spelling, but they scrape by on charisma and hustle. Or maybe you just end up with a kid who struggles to read the menu at a diner, no brilliance to compensate. And let's be real, the Goldbergs wouldn't stand for that. Poverty sharpens some people, sure, but their kids not growing up on the edge of survival. Too many safety nets, too much privilege. That fire's never gonna spark. Parel exhaled, his brow furrowed in thought. The father carries a narcissistic gene. Maybe. We amplify that. Throw in some psychopathic markers, non-violent tendencies, of course. It gives us a shot at creating a corporate overlord. Chris gave him a sardonic smile. And if it backfires, you'll have created an insufferable jerk who alienates everyone. Or worse, a monster. It's a risk, Parel admitted, his gaze distant. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. But isn't everything? You ever wonder, Chris, if God and his angels had to make decisions like this when they created us? Chris snorted softly, turning back to his workstation. If they did, they must have done it at the end of a long shift. We're way too screwed up for someone to have designed us with due diligence. We could probably sue. The quiet hum of the lab filled the space between them. Parel lingered on his assistant's words, the corner of his mouth curving into a faint smile. With a deep breath, he typed the final sequence into the program. The screen glowed with confirmation. The genetic blueprint for the male twin was complete.
Black keys and white lines, tracing out the heavy signs. Neon pulse in the dark, waiting for a lonely spark. Fingertips on the cold glass, watching every hour pass. The signal is fading low. Where did the rhythm go? I hear a hum in the wire, feeding the ghost in the fire.